Hello, everybody, and welcome to the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Surj Uppal, and today I'd like to welcome everyone to Ryan Ellingham, Director of Marketing at the Steve Marshall Group, based out of Vancouver Island. Ryan and I had the chance to work together at the Dilawri Group of Companies, where he led the Mercedes-Benz stores for me and did a great job so I could work on the group strategy, deal with vendors and budget, and I really enjoyed working with Ryan. Ryan, you were one of my best hires.
Thanks, Serge. I appreciate it. And I appreciate being here.
Well, welcome, man, and looking forward to a great conversation.
Absolutely. Let's just dive into it.
Okay, so tell you what, for those in the audience who are not familiar with the Steve Marshall Group or know a little bit about it, would you mind giving a quick overview about the group itself?
Yeah, totally. No better time or year to talk about it. This year we're celebrating 60 years being in business. So our president, Mr. Marshall, 60 years ago started his first car dealership by buying a Mercury garage up in Campbell River. And it's certainly humble beginnings. And he's built something where nearly every car dealership that seems to have come through Campbell River, he's had a play in it. And over the years, generations, if you will, he's built something quite amazing. So, we have people here now in a dealer group that's 16 locations large. It's virtually doubled in size within the last 5 to 6 years for sure. But a lot of the foundations that he's built as people first, definitely culture driven and small town values, if you will, have found its way across every market we've entered to with every brand we have. We have staff in our Campbell River locations, especially who've been around for over 40 years, working for Mr. Marshall, and the main reason is because of him. But he always flips it back on us, saying it's really because of us is why he's still happy to come to work every day. We've operated now many brands. We have Ford, we have Stellantis, we have Mazda, we have Nissan, Honda, and we also have an RV dealership in the Okanagan, and then we have a few pre-owned operations as well. Many of the groups are based out of British Columbia, so again, based out of Campbell River, and then we expand into the Lower Mainland from North Vancouver to Abbotsford, Kamloops to Kelowna, and we even have two rooftops down in Hawaii. So it's certainly a journey, but it takes all kinds and it brings all kinds, so to say.
Well, I'll tell you, in February in BC, we should have scheduled this podcast in Hawaii had I known that,
Right.
but maybe that's next year.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your journey. So when you and I were together, this was a few years ago, um, that was a lot of experience. We had a lot of responsibility. In the car world, it's very fast paced. But tell me about your connection or reconnection with the Steve Marshall Group and how you find yourself in the position today.
Yeah, totally. So to start, I started in the car industry working with Cam Clark Automotive Group. That was back in 2019. And a part of my hiring and a part of my journey there was with Steve Davidson, who was a managing partner over there. And he was the big boss, so to speak, and looking up to him and working with him in some small ways was a big influence to me, and I guess started building my professional self and my reputation. And fortunately, I was there for some good time, and I moved on to Dilawri, where you and I met and worked very well together. And as the years rolled by, Steve and I reconnected and found out that here at the group they were again growing at a pretty large pace, and they wanted to build more structure and just conscious management of the idea of marketing and advertising. So we worked very well together, and he asked if I was willing to put my hat in the ring to see if I could be the right person to join over here. I took him up on the offer to put my hat in the ring and join to the interview process, simply because knowing him and working for him and how much he values culture and an innovative mind, I took a lot of excitement in potentially working with him again. But knowing our CEO Carl Ebdrup from Reputation and Steve Marshall from Reputation, coming from the Ford world before, I was pretty excited to get into a group that again had such a long-standing reputation for people first and generations again of success. Went through the process, learned that it was a very much a ground up thing. There was very little to no marketing staff across the group. So trying to guide people through what it meant to, put emphasis on having that as a position full time. And, in the last two and a half years nearly that I've been here, we went from having three marketing staff kind of scattered across the group to now having, as of, I would say, the end of this month, we'll have pretty much a dozen across supporting dealerships or an individual dealership in some way. So it's, really been quite an experience to see something that had very little with no judgment to now definitely a full bore team.
That's great that the group itself and you have a lot of support to really move the needle. And it sounds like, uh, well, for everybody's benefit, Ryan and I were talking about before we hit the record button about the growth in your group and how that's accelerated in the last few years. Do you want to touch on that a little bit, Ryan?
Yeah, totally. So definitely speaking from being a bit of a witness and hearing all the stories that have been told, um, you know, pre-COVID, essentially, the group was definitely its Vancouver Island base. It was very much, they had their stores in Campbell River. They had one down in Courtney, and a lot of people between Carl, Steve Marshall, and managing partners and operators, and everybody else included with all that. They had a very good thing going. A very strong reputation, very loyal customer base, very loyal staff base. Um, Steve Davidson joined the group as the essentially a merger and acquisitions partner, as I understand it, and him and Carl go way longer back as great friends. And Mr. Marshall knew everything he could about Steve Davidson as well. That they were all full into there's something here, 100%. And from there it just kept going. And I give credit to everybody involved. We all look at it as the excitement of they bought their big store Titanium Ford in Surrey, and that was a huge change. And then it grew into moving into the interior, where they bought Rivershore and Kamloops and Vernon Nissan and Kelowna Truck and RV. So you can see this wave starting to build off island of getting into new neighborhoods and new brands and all that kind of stuff. And when I joined, that was just before the Hawaii purchase happened. So then there's another major thing, purchasing a U.S. operation in a very, very unfamiliar place for so many of us. And then it continued into, we purchased Abbotsford Nissan, which pretty much right now is the 1 year anniversary of our takeover of that place. And then it expanded into Bill Howich Chrysler and Campbell River Honda. That was, Bill Howich was a big player up in Campbell River, good friend of Steve Marshall. So that was definitely a very old school kind of way, right? Two friends calling each other and saying, "Well, I'm retiring essentially, or I'm semi-retiring, I guess, and let's just make a deal happen, so to speak." And I'm oversimplifying it. I wasn't a part of all that, but they made it happen. And then just recently, we acquired what's now known as Lionsgate Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in North Vancouver. Again, very very quick, very very quick pace. Pardon me. And 4 dealership purchases in 2025. And when you think about the fact that prior we were 12 locations, now we're 16, like that's huge growth for a group of our size.
For you, that's it's really exciting. Actually, it seems like an ambitious group. But how do you staff for that? Like with all that growth, it can't be easy. Like I'd imagine there's different priorities in each city in terms of philosophy, culture, approach. Are you guys struggling with that, or have you figured that out?
I think it's always a challenge for sure in any industry. In ours, it's certainly one, especially when it comes down to certain things like technicians and whatnot, because that's a very high skill type of job, and it's very well known nowadays that not everyone's really keen on going into the trade. So you're dealing with that for sure. Um, I would say that in places like Campbell River, it becomes trickier and trickier because you're not trying to steal staff from one dealership to another, which is kind of a good problem to have, I guess, when you own nearly every player in town. But it definitely brings a different challenge because we're talking about how we are a group that for 50 out of the 60 years, let's say, have been basically small town or Vancouver Island managed and ran. And then you come to a place like Titanium Ford or Abbotsford Nissan or even places like Kelowna where they're bigger cities for sure, and the talent pool is more competitive. You have higher needs, bigger operations. So I think that we manage that quite effectively, and I think the people first mindset means that people are very driven by the idea of what we have and understand the challenges that we have. So they're more motivated to take on a little more, do a little more too, right? We give a lot of credit to that.
Good for you. It's it seems like a dynamic environment, but I'd like to talk about kind of your experience because you've got, I think, a really rich experience with a few different groups and environments. With that experience, are you seeing any trends in the industry that you've noticed through the years? or some more recently?
I would say it's a great question. First off, I would say for us, there's definitely a change in how you do your business, how much we should really. I wouldn't say necessarily just rely, but put a lot of attention onto data management because again, people are chasing the dollar amount and the bottom line at the end of the day. But there's a lot more to be said with what goes into making that happen, right? Excuse me, I don't know what that is.
That's okay. Yeah,
Pause
a
one
business
second.
has to be done. But yeah, that's fair. Clean data is so important in this industry, huh?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It's the thing about having more reliance on data. We've diversified our skill set here. Like, as a growing automotive group, we start looking into things like we look for vehicle buyers, we look for people who are more specialized in certain forms of which type of customers or which types of demographics we work with. With the marketing team, we've grown exponentially in that. So understanding not just what marketing advertising is, besides something off the side of a GM's desk, but also the amount of diversity in specialties that go into it. Like when we worked at Dilawri, you and I, there were specialized positions, right? It wasn't just everybody being a Jack and Jill of all trades and just making it all work, but you had people who sit in certain roles that focus on the one thing or the one area of things and do a very good job at that. So there's certainly a lot to be said.
So tell me, as the director of marketing there with a growing group, what does a day in the life look like? Do you always follow a certain protocol, or is it different every day? How do you approach it?
I would certainly say it's a little bit of both because it ebbs and flows with what you consider like a very structured situation. So, reporting on data, what's the ROI on the efforts we've been doing, the advertising itself, debriefing events, debriefing activities. So the beginning and the end of a month is very standardized. The 10 days leading up to month end is about, what are we going to do in the next 30, 60, 90 days? And, what are our strategies? What are our plans to execute that or build and execute that? And then in the first 10 days of the following month, you're going on about what was the success of what we just did or what's the objective results of what we just did. So there's a lot to be said in me overseeing that in some way. I wouldn't take credit for the work that's being done to do it, but I'm definitely the one who's, checking reports, putting them into, centralized indexes. I take market share reports and put all that data together for people. So definitely working on the reflection and the plan ahead. And then when it comes down to the rest of the month and even overflowing into those moments is vendor management, coaching staff 100%, trying to, handle all that. I think that there's a lot to be said about, people look at a lot of vendors and in any situation about how, well, I'm the client, I'm paying you, you owe me everything kind of scenarios. But for me, I try to look at them more as partners in a sense of, there is such a thing as being a bad client or a bad customer. And I try to make sure that from whatever I handle or rather what the marketing area works with, I want to make sure there's a good relationship back and forth. So there's always a lot of that keeping up for sure.
So Ryan, you mentioned coaching. So that's such an important part, especially with the team you have, about sort of making sure you get the best out of them. Do you have a certain approach on coaching or philosophy?
Yeah, I think, being 29, I'm definitely learning every day. It's still a school day every day for me. My approach is going off of the situations at the stores. I like to figure out, of course, what is it that the store needs the most on, or if we're talking about a dealership that has one marketing person only, it's trying to key into that person's strengths to understand how can I keep them motivated to keep working at the things they're good at to make them feel good and keep pushing, but then obviously find the areas of opportunity and adjust to what they need to understand or coach them in a way that makes sense. Some people are better when you're there hands on with them, walking them through it. Some people are better when you hand them a PDF file of instructions and anything else. And ultimately, I really key into the idea of why we do things, or why is this particular thing we're learning about important, or why is your role in general important, because it's very easy to feel like the odd one out when you're in marketing in this business. So I really, really focus on the why factor in really anything I teach. I think that once you get that point across in a truly honest and in some ways vulnerable process, they really see the genuine point of, what am I there to help them with, and the fact that I'm not just trying to make them do a checklist or follow through on a checklist, but rather really motivate the purpose of it.
Yeah, especially in the marketing role, it's so different, isn't it, in the auto industry with the 30-day cycles, the tier one, tier two, tier three approaches, the balance with the OEMs. Uh,
Definitely.
yeah, it's very different. It's very unique. So if you get a good team around you, it helps a ton. If you get people from outside the industry, steep learning curve.
100%. It's been interesting because many of the people that we've hired on here, especially in a marketing role, have come from a non-automotive background. So the situation is that when I go into a recruitment process, I don't look at automotive experience as a requirement necessarily. I mean, it certainly does help, make no mistake. But I definitely look at the some people put it as a will versus skill factor. So I feel like that skills is a hard line thing, but it can be essentially taught in most cases to anybody. But the will factor is what I really key into. If I feel like that the person I'm interviewing or the person that's been hired on by somebody else, if I feel like they have the motivation to really apply or want to learn and apply to the nuances of our industry, then that's what's certainly the most successful case. Not to discredit anybody with a degree. I mean, I have one. Not to discredit people with a ton of academic or practical experience, but I really do feel like, and I'm sure you can agree with your management experiences. You can see that one individual out of many who you can see the motivation of self-starterness and willing to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. If there's a motor, then let's just point it in the right direction. If there's no motor, that's a bigger challenge. But not to use an automotive pun, but that's very much the case. So, what would you say the Steve Marshall Group should be particularly proud of? Maybe there's multiple things, but what comes to the top of your head?
Goes back to the culture side 100%. I've been very focused in being around the automotive industry ever since I was a child, being inside and outside of car dealerships and automotive shops, and then working in automotive groups post secondary. And many of these places are great. There's certainly no judgment to pass, but I feel like over here there's really a deep connection on the people side of things. Again, our president and founder, Steve Marshall, he still comes to every Christmas party. He's in his early 80s. He'll still travel across the entire province and into Hawaii to hang out with teams during their Christmas parties, showing up to annual meetings, going into his Ford store nearly every single day. So from the very top and the very beginning all the way through, there's just that genuine motivation and willingness to know everybody, be with everybody, value everybody. He parks in the farthest parking spot away from the building, walks through the shop, says good morning to everybody in the shop, knows all their stories and what's going on in their life, makes his way through the departments, all the way through again, saying good morning to every single person, knowing every little thing about them, and then going up the stairs to his office, passing all the admin staff, and taking his time to really just, again, be genuine, be their friend, be their colleague, and through all of it. And he applies that principle to every other store he visits when he can. It's amazing. So I would say that the big difference compared to anybody, anywhere I've been, pardon me, has to be that taking that example that I just explained of Mr. Marshall and truly saying with confidence that that's followed through by every other position. You can feel that genuine approach with nearly everybody you talk to around here.
That's interesting. I had a podcast recording with Asif at Okotoks Honda in Alberta, and he took a very similar approach. And what I admire about that is everybody feels valued, but it's not standard. It's a definite intent to greet everybody, to make them feel welcome, and it's very easy for a general manager or an owner to go directly up to their office, look at reports and numbers, and manage that way. But to manage people first is so impactful, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really is. And I couldn't say enough things without making it sound like I'm just, trying to advertise for the Steve Marshall group here. But I would say the other differences too is we just motivate through so many things. We do our own contests. We just did our first annual sales guild, as we call it. So we certainly celebrate top performers in many different variables and many, many prizes to go with it, to say the least. We do contests throughout the year in fixed and variable operations and spare no expense to those who have earned it or earned a spot to win in those things, it's a great thing for sure. So I would say that again, it comes back down to that people first approach.
What do you see in terms of shifts in the industry right now? Is it is it tech adoption? Is it inventory challenges? Is it um, entry level pricing? What would you say is the major shift that's impacting how you strategize for for business planning?
Well, I would say it's certainly a unique time. I mean, coming out of COVID, where interest rates were rock bottom, and then they went right up, and now they're trying to level back down again, and inventory price is the same. It's certainly changed everybody's mindset in the last 5 to 6 years. People went from there were no cars available. Now there are cars worth more than they could ever imagine it to be. Now they have to understand it's back to how it was pre-COVID. Your car is not a gold mine necessarily, and trying to make all those things understood and educate customers. Let's just say it like it is. There's certainly a stigma about car dealerships versus anything else, and there's been a lot of adjustments and reflexes to be had. Um, with governments, without going into a political type of podcast, I mean, there's been a lot of changes with EV mandates, so that obviously reflects into how the OEM itself is going to work on what are they going to manufacture, what are they going to put their R&D money into. Same thing with tariffs. Again, not trying to be political, but that's posed many challenges to manufacturing cycles. What cars can we get and for how much and for how long? So there's certainly been inventory constraints, and it will vary by brand. Like, a brand like Nissan compared to Honda, Nissan's definitely taken a harder hit. Stellantis versus Ford, Stellantis has taken a more difficult hit. But we found that it's kind of interesting. We've grown substantially with Stellantis and Nissan, and people in some ways would probably be like, well, why there, right? That seems very interesting of a strategy, and I can't comment on the strategy itself. I'm not the one who makes those decisions, but I would say we've certainly made the best of the situation. I would like to say, just again by the attitude and people and clients. Um, on a technology front, I would say there's a huge motivation for things like AI. It's definitely the buzzword right now. I think that a lot of people are trying to find ways to build a new mousetrap 100%. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with, what do I really need right now, or what's a good idea. You're definitely dealing with with all respect, you're dealing with a lot of old dogs in this industry still. So you're still they're trying to catch up to the idea of digital advertising or the idea of how to manage Google and Meta, and now you throw a whole let's build AI for your dealership thing into there, right? And it's I call it a good challenge because sometimes you have to just work on managing expectations or working with that what's the why factor in doing this. Um, so I would say that for sure it's just moving really really quickly on the technology or the supportive technology side for sure.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. Sometimes there 80% of companies they know they should implement AI, they just don't know how. And sometimes it's the simplest way is what is a menial or a simple task that takes a lot of time that we should automate, and sometimes that leads to the original adoption. But it's yeah, it's definitely it's evolving all the time, and with automotive, sometimes tried and true is trusted, but there is definitely a first mover advantage for sure with automation. If for nothing else, just to get the most out of your people, so they can spend time on what really counts, less on admin stuff. So good on you for pursuing that.
Thank you.
You'd
Yeah.
also mentioned that with the growth and with the culture, that seems to be a snowball effect with business results and really kind of the engagement with your team. And if your team's engaged, you can serve your customers better. Have you kind of found that to be the case?
100%. You can definitely see the true passion for people's work in this place. 100%. There's a lot of motivation to want to do more or learn more with many people. And again, I find that it's such a I'm not the expert of people and culture around here, but sometimes it's just going back to the basics and being very good at them that you can see create that self starter attitude or certainly cultivate the I don't want to say exponential growth as if there's never an end to it, but you can see people who definitely bring bigger results or certainly are keen on challenging themselves and being tough on themselves when things don't go right. And that's not always a great thing, but you can see again the genuine passion and ownership no matter what way it goes in these folks. I would say it's a mixture of the old school of somebody who's been in business for 60 years and implementing that genuine generosity and appreciation for everything around him and trying to mate it up to how fast this industry is moving. Again, it's very easy for us to look at it, especially during the COVID days, which is what car do you want? It's not here. Give me a free, give me a deposit, and we'll make it work. Right? It was very easy for a lot of people to fall down that path and still be stuck in that path in some ways. But I think over here, old school is certainly the best school.
So when it comes to a new approach, or maybe bringing that old school approach up to speed with kind of the tools available today, what problems do you think AI or automation can solve for the auto industry?
I think AI can definitely solve a lot of issues on the scalability front. So when it comes down to things like lead management or data handling and document management, there's a lot to be said in all of that. Um, I think that you can argue, or some people who are more of an expert than me can argue that there's virtually limitless opportunities with AI, no matter what department, no matter what function in the operation, except for just fixing your car by hand, of course. Um, I think the real thing to point out, it may not answer your question, but I hope it's still insightful for those watching, is you really have to ask yourself, like, what do you do very, very well here, or what process do you think you're doing 8 out of 10 with, right? Like, there's something I'm doing an 80% satisfaction rate on. I know that I'm very good at these things, but the 20% that I'm missing the mark on, that's what I need help with. And really focusing into what that can look like for you, because I think that a lot of us can be sold on the idea that it can just do everything for us. We take it on and then we just let it do its thing without real any guidance or any knowledge building, just saying, yeah, I'm going to take it at face value and let it ride, and then it creates way more frustrations or complications. So for anybody, it's taking that step back and going again, like taking ownership of what do you do very, very well, and what's holding you back from doing even better than that, and then seeing what potential AI solution can be inserted into that.
So, Ryan, with growth comes change and sometimes duplication or different challenges. Are there any bottlenecks in the industry that you see kind of impeding acceleration, growth, those sort of things?
One that we joke about around here is certainly, and we love every general manager and managing partner we have, but sometimes they can be the bottleneck in some ways, right? You can put a lot of information or a lot of change on one individual, and then it's a bit of a bottleneck between executive team or leadership through a general manager to people on their team, or vice versa. So that's just a natural part of the role, and I give them a lot of credit for being able to handle it. I think ultimately, though, the bottleneck, if I was to look at it more of a theory or a general point, is just training. I think that again, like old school is great when it comes down to the genuine people and the genuine self-started attitude, but sometimes we can take it with a bit of a cavalier attitude and also be a bit overconfident in what we're like, yeah, we can do it, we can take it on, or again, bring in AI and let it do everything, we'll figure it out as we go, and we kind of overlook that training component, and that creates its own bottleneck to success, right? Or it can be a complete roadblock to it, quite frankly. So definitely taking or appreciating the time to slow down and go through that.
So when we talk about training, we're talking more than text, right? We're talking about sales, HR, finance, like the whole gamut of departments.
Those ones, especially when it comes down to implementation of technology like AI, for sure.
Okay, wonderful.
I think that technicians, ironically, are a bit immune to things like AI because I mean you can argue cars are becoming electric and more computers and whatnot, but ultimately like they have their own challenges. But I feel like the bottleneck of AI and learning is not one of them. So that's a big one I've been seeing.
Well, I tell you, with 22 and 21-year-old sons, I've been telling them as much as I'm involved in this industry, the trades might be the one thing, or techs, things like that, where you're hands on. That's AI proof. That's future proof. for the techs kind of working in the sector, they've got a bright, stable career ahead of them, and that should excite them. But what would you, if you could solve one major challenge today for the Steve Marshall Group or for the industry, what would it be?
That's a very interesting one to ask for sure. You know, I think it's education into technology for sure. I think there's a lot to be said about, really taking a hard look at what everyone's experience has led us up to today. And nothing against those companies that are going out there and building new and great things, but it's moving really, really quickly. And sometimes we need to take a moment and ask ourselves, why is this something that we really need right now? Or why is this something that I even feel an interest to pursue or put hours and money and other resources into it? Um, it would definitely be something to solve, and it's a big one, right? Like it's so much easier said than done. This is a very fast paced industry. It's a very results based industry. So when somebody comes along and promises you a new mousetrap, so to speak, like you can't help but get excited about it and want to dive into it and be an early adopter of it. But I would say that, if you want to call it a problem, is there's just sometimes we really do need to slow down and be a bit more methodical about it for sure. About the approach to new technology and AI.
So, okay, got it. So, with that mention of how quickly things move in auto, have you had a chance to think about as a group where do you want to be 6 or 12 months from now, or does that kind of zip by?
Well, from the perspective of our COO and CEO and president, I'm sure they have a many plans and a great vision to say the least. For me, I see it as in the next 6 to 12 months. I think that there's a lot to be said about challenging our thinking and expectations with technology and process. Um, and sometimes those two things will go hand in hand, and sometimes they won't. But we've grown so quickly and so successfully, and there's nothing against that. It's a fantastic thing to be a part of. But I think there's a lot of hope in me and a lot of commitment to slowing it down a little bit, keeping good records, keeping good data, and learning from everybody's experience. Again, we've essentially added 30% of size in 12 months. So it's something to say. Like, there's a lot of people and a lot of years of experience that have come aboard with that, and then the new people we've hired to also be a part of those operations, and many more that we can really learn from. And coincidentally, just yesterday, we took on a whole new position of a director of sales for our automotive group. That person has over 20 years experience in the industry. Like, I can't imagine what that guy can pull out and show us. It'll be an amazing experience. So I'm quite excited about that knowledge base building for sure.
So, is there something about the Steve Marshall Group that maybe most people don't know? Little known things about their approach to community support, or their approach to staff, or their approach to uh, the families of their staff. Like, is there something that we walk into a dealership or a rooftop, as we call it in the industry, and we just see what's customer facing. But is there something that's behind the scenes that um, is unique to the Steve Marshall Group?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, stepping out of the people and culture aspect for a moment is definitely the philanthropy aspect. There's a lot of people here who take pride in supporting their local community. The amount of time and money and resources donated can vary between who's involved, where it's involved, how long they're involved. Um, but we have very many initiatives that the stores take on themselves. Like, as a group, we don't mandate anything. We don't take a whole Steve Marshall Group approach to one very large donation. We love to give that autonomy to the rooftops themselves. So there's some examples of, this dealership's over here is pulling $100 out of every car deal to donate to a local SBCA foundation, or, this dealership over here is taking a 3 month commitment to take food, item, and money donations to donate to a society for young families or single moms or food banks or things like that. And then there's another one where it's a bit of time ago now, but it was a really big one where a dealership piles a year long program together in support of a hospital foundation, and the winner gets a whole car. So it really can be far and wide. And what's amazing about it is the creativity and the learning about seeing this whole thing big picture, learning about so many causes and so many communities, and quite frankly, growing up and living in a big city myself, like you sometimes feel like some of these things are overlooked or forgotten about, and it really is amazing to see how much it thrives in so many places.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It can be a lost art, can't it? It's very heartwarming to see that some groups still focus on the basics and take care of your current customer, treat your new ones well, and your team well, and you can't help it but be successful.
Absolutely, it's been something amazing to see for sure.
So, Ryan, in the interest of time, tell people how they can get a hold of the Steve Marshall Group.
Totally. So, they can check out our website anytime, stevemarshallgroup.com. Pretty simple as that. Our handle on Instagram is Steve Marshall Group, so you can't miss it. Uh, for me, I mean, I'm happy to put myself out there for anybody. You can email me directly, ryan.e at stevemarshallgroup.com. Happy to answer any questions or anybody who's genuinely curious about our business. And, I don't have the answers for everything, but I certainly know somebody who probably will have an answer for most questions if it's not me. So happy to be that central point for sure.
Well, I'm glad you're part of an amazing team and you've landed at a spot where um, you've got that responsibility, but you also have the opportunity to coach and seems like endless potential for the group and yourself in the future. So um, good on you. It's such a crazy such a crazy industry, and then you layer on things like we were touching on, which yes, they're political, but they're also business, right? The trade deals and the tariffs, and you add that onto an already complex industry. It's really really interesting, and there's never a dull day. But I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's always nice to reconnect, and for everybody that joined us today. Ryan is a true professional, but also somebody I consider a friend. So for him and I to discuss auto is a real pleasure. So I want to thank everybody today for joining us on the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Surj Uppal, and I'd like to thank Ryan Ellingham, Director of Marketing at the Steve Marshall Group, for joining us today. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Serge. Appreciate it.